Right now, deep inside Russian territory, a building that once housed Vladimir Putin's most feared intelligence officers is nothing but a smoking crater. Not from a stealth bomber, not from a billion-dollar missile, but from a 40-year-old Soviet jet flying with French precision weapons, American GPS satellites, and a consumer tablet duct-taped to the dashboard. This mission was never supposed to happen. The FSB headquarters, Russia's shadow police, the successor to the KGB, was considered untouchable, protected by advanced air defenses, shielded by secrecy, and wrapped in the arrogance of a regime convinced it could not be reached. Until one Ukrainian pilot decided otherwise. He would fly at treetop height lower than a billboard, then blast upward into the teeth of Russia's most expensive air defense network for just 20 seconds of opportunity. If he failed, he'd never make it home. And yet, here we are. Welcome to War Mechanics, where we break down the real engineering, the battlefield innovation, and the impossible missions reshaping modern warfare. The aircraft chosen for this mission was never designed to do what it was about to attempt. A Ukrainian MiG-29 built in the early 1980s, a relic from another era. A fighter engineered to dogfight NATO jets, not strike fortified buildings with pinpoint accuracy. It rolled off a Soviet production line before GPS even existed, and yet on this morning it carried two of the most advanced precision-guided bombs Europe has ever made. Picture this: Soviet avionics, French guidance kits, American satellite navigation, Ukrainian battlefield innovation, all bolted together on a weapons rack that looked like it belonged in a garage workshop. Wires routed through access panels never meant to be opened. GPS antennas taped into awkward positions. And right there in the cockpit, mounted with zip ties, a standard tablet running off-the-shelf software, the kind you use for Netflix. Now being used to target one of the most secure Russian facilities in the entire war. This wasn't aerospace engineering perfection. This was necessity, ingenuity, and pure determination blended into a jet that should not exist. A platform only still flying because Ukrainian ground crews spend countless nights turning scrap into survival. The bomb's two AASM Hammer-guided weapons represented a completely different universe from the MiG that carried them. These things were built to slot neatly into modern NATO aircraft with digital systems and clean avionics integration. They rely on inertial navigation backed by encrypted GPS guidance. They can strike a specific room, even a specific window, from up to 45 miles away. But the MiG-29 couldn't speak their language, so Ukraine built a translator. Software that converts Western targeting data into formats a Soviet-era jet can understand. It's the kind of patchwork solution that would get laughed out of an engineering review. Unless you're in a war where the alternative is losing your country. And that fusion of old steel and new tech was now screaming toward a building Russia believed was permanently out of reach. After seeing how a decades-old MiG-29 was transformed into a precision strike aircraft, what part of this improvisation surprised you the most and why? The man flying this mission wasn't some rookie with fresh wings. He was a veteran, mid-40s, calm under pressure, and painfully aware that every second of this flight might be his last. At 6:15 a.m., his MiG-29 thundered across the Ukrainian countryside at just 165 feet above the ground, lower than some highway overpasses in the United States. This wasn't a style choice. It was survival. Flying that low meant skimming over wheat fields, grazing treetops, and blasting past farmhouses so close that the engine roared shattered windows. Any mistake, a misjudged hill, a power line unseen in the haze, would turn both man and machine into scattered metal and dust. The pilot's hands never stopped moving. Tiny stick and rudder corrections every second to avoid the smallest obstacle. Even birds became threats when you're moving at over 550 miles per hour. Above him were Russia's S-400 batteries, the same systems advertised as being able to kill stealth fighters and shoot down ballistic missiles hundreds of miles away. If radar ever saw him, his life expectancy would drop to about 30 seconds. But the Earth itself was his shield. Curvature blocked Russian sensors. Terrain broke up radar reflections. For now, he was invisible. Inside the cockpit, alarms stayed mercifully quiet until the moment every pilot dreads. To deliver the bombs, he had to break cover. The mission required altitude, a sudden combat climb to nearly 16,500 feet, a maneuver guaranteed to light up every radar screen from Belgorod to Moscow. The only question was whether he could complete the release and drop back down before a missile found him. This wasn't a strike mission anymore. It was a race against physics reaction time and the most advanced air defense Russia owns. He knew what the odds looked like. He also knew the mission mattered more than he did. At 6:22 a.m., everything changed in a single pull of the stick. The MiG-29, which had been carving through the air just feet above the ground, suddenly pointed its nose toward the sky. The climb was brutal. G-forces pressed the pilot deep into his seat as the jet rocketed upward, trading the safety of low altitude for the open jaws of every Russian radar in western Russia. The altimeter spun like a slot machine. 3,000 feet. $6,000. $10,000. Each number meant greater visibility and greater danger. Inside the cockpit, the threat receiver lit up like a Christmas tree. S-400 search radars saw him first, then fire control radars locked on. The pilot didn't need a translation. Those tones meant missiles would follow within seconds. But he still had to keep climbing. The weapons needed altitude and energy to glide the final distance. If he released too low, the entire mission would fail mid-air. 16,400 feet. That was the magic number, just enough height for the Hammer bombs to arc toward the FSB headquarters and bury themselves deep inside before detonating. But reaching that altitude meant he was exposed to a lone jet challenging the most fearsome air defense network Russia owns. On the ground, Russian operators scrambled, confident they were seconds from a kill. At peak altitude, the iPad taped to the panel flashed green launch acceptable. He pressed down. Two deep jolts shook the aircraft as the bombs dropped away. Without hesitation, he inverted the jet and slammed into a dive, hoping gravity and terrain masking would save him from what came next. And that leads us to a question worth thinking about when you push a pilot into a situation where success and death share the same trajectory. Is this the future of modern air combat, or a once-in-a-generation mission that no one should ever have to repeat? The moment the MiG pulled over the release point, the whole mission passed from man to machine. For the next 60 seconds, the fate of the FSB headquarters would be decided by software rockets and math. The two AASM Hammer kits under the wings were born in a European lab. Inertial navigation fused with GPS, a small solid rocket motor and control surfaces that turn a falling bomb into a guided missile. Each unit weighed roughly 550 pounds and could be pushed to standoff ranges of up to 45 miles when boosted enough distance for a pilot to drop and duck out of the engagement zone. But none of that mattered until the old MiG could speak the bomb's language. The Soviet-era wiring and analog displays were never designed to hand off target coordinates to a Western weapon. That's where Ukrainian ingenuity came in. Engineers rigged a translator system and off-the-shelf tablet running custom middleware hooked to jury-rigged pylons and patched into the MiG's hardpoints. The tablet converted map coordinates, inertial offsets, and release parameters into a signal the AASM could accept. It was ugly, brittle, and brilliant. At release, the tablet confirmed the ballistic solution wind airspeed climb angle and the bomb's own rocket burn profile. The pilot hit the physical release and the hammers dropped cleanly away. For a moment, the jet was empty, free-falling through air that felt like a vacuum of decision. Then the rocket motors ignited a brief, furious burn that pushed each munition toward Mach 0.8, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Guidance loops engaged the inertial measurement unit, held the trajectory steady while GPS corrected drift, and the control canards made hundreds of micro-adjustments per second. In the terminal phase, the bombs behaved like guided missiles, adjusting for last-second wind gusts and moving targets inside the compound. Their flight profiles were optimized to present a minimal radar cross-section and a steep terminal dive. One hammer aimed for an administrative block, the other for a structural node designed to bring the roof down inward. This was not raw luck. It was a marriage of precise Western ordnance and scrappy Ukrainian software engineering. For a brief, terrifying minute, cheap ingenuity and elite European hardware synchronized perfectly, and a building that had once seemed invulnerable suddenly had a hole in its roof with a name on it. On paper, the S-400 is terrifying, a layered integrated system built to detect, track, and destroy threats long before they ever get close. Its 92 N6 gravestone search radar can sweep hundreds of miles, tally hundreds of targets, and hand off engagements to long-range 48 N6 interceptors. But real-world fights expose gaps that specs never mention. This morning, those gaps were fatal. The sequence unfolded like a classroom example of how complexity becomes vulnerability. First, the MiG's toss bomb profile changed the geometry. The hammers were released in a near-vertical descent, presenting a tiny radar cross-section, and moving at steep angles the S-400's engagement logic wasn't optimized for. Fire control solutions calculated intercept windows, assuming aircraft or cruise missiles with flatter, more predictable trajectories. These guided munitions were doing something different, powered fast and tiny in terminal approach. Second timing killed the defenders. The S-400 needs a short but non-zero pipeline, detect, classify, lock, fire, intercept. Against conventional profiles, that works. Against a pop-up fighter plunging bombs in a short, precise arc, that pipeline collapses. The system's engagement probability drops because the intercept geometry and fuse timing no longer line up. Two 48 N6 missiles blasted off, leaving smoke trails that screamed across the sky. They soared like sledgehammers, fast and furious, but built for a different job. Their proximity fuses were expecting a target within a large, lethal bubble. What they encountered were compact, dense, high-speed bodies with terminal dives that put fragments outside the kill envelope. Misses of a few hundred feet turned a likely intercept into harmless detonations. Third, the human factor amplified the mechanical limits. Radar operators and fire control crews scrambled through checklists designed for scripted threats. They reclassified, reallocated, and launched. But the decision cycle, the time between noticing and acting, couldn't be compressed enough. By the time the crew realized the bombs weren't going to fly straight, the jet was already below radar horizon again, and the interceptors had become expensive fireworks. All of this leads to a simple but uncomfortable truth: the S-400 didn't malfunction. It was simply asked to do a job it wasn't built for. And now I want your take: which failure hurt Russia more today? One, assumptions built into the S-400 that couldn't adapt to real combat, or two, the crews reacting too slowly to an attack they'd never trained for. Comment 1 or 2 below. 06 into 7 hours. The first AASM Hammer came screaming down at a near-vertical angle, guided by American GPS satellites and inertial memory working in perfect sync. It punched through the roof of the FSB headquarters, Putin's old agency, the storied successor to the KGB. A building meant to control narratives, not withstand explosions. The warhead shape-charged liner formed a jet of superheated copper that knifed through concrete and steel support beams like they were cheap drywall. Inside, pressure surged faster than lungs could collapse. Floors meant for paperwork and bureaucracy instantly became blast chambers. Filing cabinets turned into shrapnel. Desks became battering rams. Hallways that once carried classified secrets now channeled destructive shockwaves, bouncing pressure back into itself until every load-bearing structure inside was stressed beyond its limit. And then came the follow-up strike. The second bomb arrived just a third of a second later, but that tiny gap made all the difference. The first explosion had already weakened support columns. The second destroyed them. You could see the building's skeleton give up. One floor pancaked onto the next mass compounding mass, each level slamming the one below like a steel-reinforced sledgehammer. What stood tall seconds earlier now folded in on itself, collapsing into a heap of rubble, rebar, and burning cables. Documents that once shaped Russia's strategy against Ukraine gone. Intelligence officers who thought they were untouchable gone. A psychological message delivered not just to the Kremlin, but to every security asset watching: nowhere is safe. And here's the part that should give every military strategist chills: the destruction wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. Ukraine didn't just hit a building, they struck at an institution built on fear, surveillance, and control. Let's take a second to think about that impact. In your view, what is more damaging to Russia here, the physical loss of a major intelligence facility or the shockwave of humiliation that shows even the FSB can be hit? I'd love to hear your take in the comments. By the time the smoke settled over Belgorod, a far bigger realization was spreading through war rooms across the world. This strike wasn't just a tactical victory, it was a blueprint, a threat to every nation that relies on billion-dollar air defense systems to feel safe. A 40-year-old Soviet fighter jet patched together with French precision bombs, an encrypted iPad, and the kind of ingenuity born from desperation had just slipped past the most advanced Russian defenses and erased a headquarters of the FSB, the very organization meant to predict and stop such attacks. That breaks assumptions, that bends doctrine, that changes everything. Military planners have long believed that modern war is ruled by stealth jets, hypersonic missiles, and sprawling defensive networks, the kind of toys only superpowers can afford. But Ukraine proved that asymmetry cuts both ways. If you can't match your enemy's strength, you attack their weakness. You rewrite the rules with what you have. And suddenly you don't need to dominate the sky to win a fight up there. You just need to be clever enough to make expensive systems pointless. Look at the numbers: a MiG-29 that should have belonged in a museum, weapons not originally meant for it, a mission no rational planner would green light. And yet, here we are. Russia's prized S-400 couldn't do a thing about it. The FSB couldn't hide from it. Billions in defense spending couldn't prevent what a single pilot accomplished before finishing his morning coffee. And that's the fear spreading through capitals from Moscow to Beijing. If one underdog air force can MacGyver its way past the world's premier air defense architecture, what stops others from trying the same? What happens when ingenuity becomes the most lethal weapon on the battlefield? Let's consider what this means for the future. Do you think this kind of low-cost innovation is about to reshape how wars are fought and who can actually win them? I'm curious where you stand, so tell me below. We just witnessed a mission that should have been impossible, yet it worked. And not because Ukraine suddenly became a superpower overnight, but because the entire idea of military power is shifting right in front of us. When a retrofitted MiG-29 and 2 precision bombs can humiliate one of the most feared intelligence services on Earth, the questions get a lot bigger than just who won the battle. They start digging into what war will look like tomorrow and who is ready for it. So before we wrap up, I want to hear your thoughts, because the debate sparked by moments like this matter just as much as the moment itself. Question 1. When it comes to future conflicts, which resource do you think will shape the battlefield? More expensive hardware or clever innovation that pushes old systems way beyond their limits? In other words, does money still determine military strength, or has creativity become the real superweapon? Question 2. If a nation can spend millions on air defense systems only to watch cheap, customized weapons slip right through them, does that make legacy defenses outdated? Or do you still believe high-end systems like the S-400 remain essential to keep the playing field balanced? Question 3. This one hits deeper. How much does symbolism matter in war? Destroying an FSB headquarters sends a message larger than the rubble on the ground. Do you think psychological impact can do more long-term damage than the loss of equipment itself? Your take isn't just a comment, it adds to the conversation about how power really works in the 21st century. So scroll down, pick a question, and jump in. I'm reading every reply. Would love to know how you see this future unfolding. As the last embers cooled over Belgorod, the message was already clear: the age of predictable warfare is over. A lone MiG-29, upgraded with zip-tied tech and determination, just rewrote the rules in a single strike. Russia's walls of steel radars, missiles, and intelligence fortresses weren't toppled by overwhelming force, but by imagination. That's the new battlefield, not who has the most, but who thinks the fastest. And here's where you and I will keep following this transformation together. Because every week this war reveals a new twist, another moment where creativity punches above its weight and the world's assumptions crumble. If you want to stay ahead of these shifts, the tactics, the technology, the hidden stories changing modern conflict, make sure you subscribe to War Mechanics. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next breakthrough that makes the impossible real. This is only the beginning.